Hi, good evening everybody. This is the Licensing Committee of the 5th of November. Apologies for absence, I don't think, apart from Ann Court, I don't think there's anybody not here. Okay, declarations of interest, anybody? No urgent matters. Minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of July. Okay, do you all agree?
Yep.
Good, thank you, they're signed. Right, the Gambling Act of 2005. 2005. I've just been told there's no fire evacuation, no fire, let's start again, there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, therefore if the alarm goes, please evacuate the building. The fire exits are located at the rear of this room, go down the stairs and meet in the Memorial Park and get cold. Webcast of the meeting is going to be webcast, and mobile phones, please will you switch them off onto silent. Thank you, Councillor Putty. Right, now, Gambling Act 2005 Policy Review. Mr. Draper, you're going to...
Good evening, councillors. Welcome to the dark evenings of November, really. But anyway, the Gambling Statement of Principles is one of our more frequent visitors in that it rolls around every 3 years under legislation. Fortunately, it's also one of the ones where we have least change. So since you last looked at this, there has been no significant change to the legislation or the regulations that affect what we in local authority do. Gambling is in the news very frequently, but most of that is at the national level. How we enforce it and what we enforce hasn't changed in the last 3 years. There's been some minor changes to the law on fixed odds betting machines. I'm sure you will have seen what a scourge they are, but there's been a rather dramatic change in both the prizes and the what's the word I'm after? Stakes, thank you. That is there, and that is pretty much it. So the reason that your policy looks very different to the last one is because this is one of the first policies that will be brought in under the, as you will see on page 11, the new regime of Basingstoke and Dean Hart, the working together heading. Sophie and myself have the pleasure of taking an identical paper to the Hart Committee tomorrow night. And it is identical, apart from the bit in the bottom where we'll set the dates in. But as you can see, this policy is adopted by Hart District Council, the meeting of the council, and Basingstoke and Dean meeting of the council. So the style of the policy is very different. It talks about the councils, so it's different in appearance, but the content, the aims, the objectives are exactly the same as the previous policy were. The only reason that the policy is different in any way, shape or form is the local area profile, which is a legal requirement, but that doesn't have to be in the policy, so the local area profile is set within our website, and that is used by any applications for companies involved in gambling who have to do a mandatory risk assessment. So it's basically a description of the towns, the population, any specific risk factors. The good news for us and for Hart is that actually we don't have a particularly high set of risk factors in any way, shape or form. So a number of the things that gambling companies would normally have to address in their risk assessments simply don't occur within this borough or the district of Hart. Likewise, there is no difference between the adoptive policies on casinos between the two authorities. So neither of you say that casinos cannot be brought into the area. However, it would require an Act of Parliament for either of you two to do so, because the names of Hart and Basingstoke and Dean are not on the original regulation list. So I don't think we'll be having many casinos very shortly. But since there's only been one new one in the country since 2005, I don't think we're exactly going to be troubled by that too much. So the policy I put to you is basically different in appearance, but very similar in content and identical in aims and objectives. Any questions?
I have a few, some of which I think you just answered. On page 8, you say it does not contain any significant changes, but what you've said is it's only the way it's formatted, everything else remains unchanged. And at the bottom of the page you say there's been limited amendment required to the bottom, other than to adapt its style. Does it mean there's no amendment required rather than limited?
Sorry. As I said, Councillor, the only significant change is on the section about the stakes for gaming machines, which is on page 51 or 41, whichever one the page number you're looking at. And as I say, that literally affects the machines with which were the fixed odds betting terminals. Other than that, there's been no other change even to the stakes.
24, you refer to the local area profile, which you've now told us is on the website. We can look at it there. 2.8, the Council will consider all applications in accordance with the principles contained in section 153 of the Act. Is there anything significant in those principles that we ought to know about, or is it just background?
The Gambling Act, very much like the Licensing Act that came before it, is a permissive piece of legislation. So the assumption is that we would permit those activities subject to them meeting the key requirements of public safety, etc., and a sort of public health test. As I say, there's very little movement in the gambling industry at the moment. It's been characterised by a succession of mergers and acquisitions, and if anything, the number of gambling premises on the high streets of Britain are actually declining as various mergers take out ones where they're the same companies, 2 or 3 places down on the street. So there's not a growth industry in the high street, which is obviously what we legislate for and what we enforce. The growth industry is online, and that is outside of our remit.
Same section. For clarification, these are different to the licensing objectives of the Licensing Act 2003. Any particular reason why?
The fundamental principles are on 6.7 on the Gambling Commission 1, which are, Sophie has generously pointed them out to me. I need my glasses to read them. Preventing gambling from being used as a source of crime and disorder, being associated with crime and disorder, or being used to support crime. Ensuring that gambling is conducted in a fair and open way. That's very different wording to the LAO3. And protecting children and other vulnerable persons from harm is very similar to the LAO3 one. So, as I say, it's a public health-based test predominantly.
5, 284. Interested party has concerns relating to one of the licensing objectives. Should that be legitimate concerns?
Sorry, Councillor, can you tell the section again?
284. It talks about interested party has concerns, but should that be just legitimate concerns rather than I just don't like it?
Yes, again, we would, the term we tend to use is vexatious or repetitive. When they say with legitimate concerns, it says concerns, we would listen to concerns and then make a determination as to whether they are relevant or not.
Right, next paragraph. The Licensing Acts panel, what's the membership of that?
Yes, it would be the committee. Sorry, it should be subcommittee there rather than panel.
Um, 473, last but one of the bullet points. The area where a Category C machines are located is arranged so that it can be observed by staff. Could that be should be observed by staff? Because just because it can be doesn't mean to say it is.
Yeah, I mean, for this sort of thing, it is not necessary for a member of staff to be present, as you will see across the way that the layout makes that thing, but it is often observed through the use of CCTV equipment. So it is not uncommon to find that the control room of a family entertainment centre looks more like a police control room with a bank of monitors in it.
Page 51, top of the page, maximum stake from April 2019, maximum stake from January 2014. They've both got asterisks by them, but there's nothing at the bottom to refer to.
I'm sure we can live without the asterisks.
And lastly, page 53, right at the end, what does the 9.2 refer to?
That's the checking test. To prove that you've checked it right the way to the very end.
I take it you'll leave that in for tomorrow then, just to see whether I'll pick it up.
I can assure you Hart have an identical copy.
Thank you for that.
They pick up. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
The officer says significant changes will be identified. Are there any insignificant changes?
I can assure the councillor there are not even any insignificant changes in the legislation. As I say, whilst the Gambling Commission have been very busy, their efforts are almost entirely focused on the online activities and the larger one. The sector that we as a local authority legislate and enforce really is in decline. This is, I won't say it's old hat, if you like, but betting shops are still pretty busy. But the growth side of the trade is all online, as you would see on the television, and the countless adverts therefore.
Councillor Jones.
Okay. I know you just answered part of the question. My concern's been over the years is when we end up, and you say it's a decline in industry, but we do end up with a number of betting shops in one area or on estates. Does our policy allow us to stop these shops if we feel that, one, there's too many, or we don't want them on the estate because of gambling and different things, and not just the estates, across the borough, to be fair. We say, you know, as you said there, it may be in decline, but it can always change, and over the years we've ended up with, well, especially at the top of the town, I think there's about 2 or 3 or there used to be, I don't bet, so, but there is a problem with gambling anyway in this country, and I just wonder whether we've got the tools to actually stop more shops coming in if they wish them.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yeah, I think it's a very well put question. As I've already mentioned, that the legislation is permissive. So the assumption is that the betting shop or the betting premise would be granted its application unless there is evidence and reason against it. So it would be it's a combination of their risk assessment and our risk assessment. So they have to identify any particular risks. So, for example, vulnerable premises nearby, perhaps, I don't know, homeless hostel or something like that, where there might be a vulnerable population. And we would be able to use that information to consider whether an application should proceed or not. We've gone through the three fundamental principles of that, and it is, as I say, it's a public health style test. But we would have to be able to demonstrate, just as we do with the licensing, that there is a reason why we shouldn't. And the fact that we may not like it does not mean that it shouldn't be there. As I say, the situation at the moment is that they are naturally declining rather than being opened anywhere. There have been huge spurts in the numbers within some city centre areas, but Basingstoke and Dean, rather alas or otherwise, doesn't quite have that allure.
I'll just come back on that. I do hear what you're saying, and so if, for instance, I don't know, for argument's sake, there was a turn in the industry, they want to put 4 shops at the top of town, and you've already got 3, and they might be different businesses, could we technically stop them, is what I'm really saying, or would we have to say, well, we've got them, they've done the health and safety risk, and we, as the top of the town, for instance, it could be anywhere, but it's top of town's the easy thing, well, do we want 4 betting shops there, if you see what, or 7 betting shops there? We don't, it's more like a casino rather than a shopping area. Would we be able to do anything about it? It's really what I'm saying. I hear what you say.
I think the short answer to that is probably no. I think you would. It's like having 4 pubs next to each other at the top of town. You know, if there is a demand and they can sell beer and they don't cause breaches of the main parts of the legislation, then we would have no grounds to refuse their application. It would be risk assessed. It's a public health test, but if there are existing premises there, it would be which are operating without any problem and without any issues, it would be very hard to say no to a 4th if there are already 3 there.
That's the question.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that point, I've got a vague recollection about 4.5 years ago. We actually tried that at the top of the town, but it was overturned at appeal because, as the officer said, there was no legal basis on which to turn it down.
I have an idea. That was on planning.
Sorry, we've done one appeal and we granted it because there was no reason to turn it down, because the objections were from moral and religious reasons, not anything that we could use under the Act.
I guess, I don't know how these things work, but I guess if they don't run at a profit, they would close anyway. So, okay. Any other questions?
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, have we done an audit of how many betting establishments we have got in Basingstoke and Dean?
Not really an audit, but I suspect that between us, Sophie and I could probably name most of them. We literally, I think we probably get half a dozen across the patch.
Centred around the town centre and then 3 in the wider Basingstoke area.
Yeah. So, as I say, I doubt that we reach double figures across the entire district.
Yeah, you said that it's declining. So, are there any of the establishments that have been closed around this area?
Yes, I believe there was recently a merger between Coral and Ladbrokes. So premises at the top of town, they had a Coral and a Ladbrokes. Now there's only one, which is the combined shop. So I know of one that is closed in the top of town, and as the decline carries on, I will probably see more closing in the top of town. but we are down one Ladbrokes and or Coral.
Because I know that that the main area now is online, and that's got the growth where we have got whereas establishments that we have got around the borough, like you said, it's declining, which is good in many ways. So is that because when we see that although it is fun for people to go and bet, but on the other side it's an illness as well once it's really catch on to people. Oh, it is, yeah,
Yes.
likewise. Yeah. Uh-huh. Ye- No. I was coming to that, Councillor Hussey, that it is not only like, for some people it can be an illness, you see, because... yes, of course. Yeah. No, thank you.
Through the chair, please. Councillor Garner.
I take it that last reply referred to betting establishments. There are a number of amusement arcades around the town as well. Have you got statistics for the number of licensed premises that we do have in the town and in the borough?
You mean premises that are licensed under the Gambling Act or licensed premises full stop?
Under the Gambling Act.
Come back to the answer that I just gave. Even with the amusement arcades, I very much doubt that we top out more than over a dozen across the entire borough. As I say, they're just not a very... They're quite an old-fashioned, if you like, form of accessing those activities now.
If nobody else has notified me they wish to speak, the recommendation is on page 7. Do you all agree? Thank you. Right. Licensing update.
Thank you, Chair. The biggest change we've had in the licensing team recently is the movement of the Hart team over to the Basingstoke office. So we now have the 3 staff members who are based at Hart District Council working from the Basingstoke office. They've been in for just over a week now, and other than some teething issues with the IT, everything else is working. And as Rob mentioned, the Gambling Act statement of policy that you've got in front of you is the start of us starting to harmonise our policies and procedures. We already have a shared street trading policy. This is the Gambling Act one. We'll be moving to look at the taxi and private hire policy as well. And work is also underway to move the Hart District data set over to the Basingstoke system so that the Hart officers can work off one database. At the moment they are logging into Basingstoke and into the Hart system, which is a slightly clunky way of working. So in an effort to try and streamline our procedures further and make it a more efficient service, we will be looking to merge those databases. That's a slightly longer term project, and I will provide an update on that when we've got some dates in for that going ahead.
Any questions, anybody? Noted. And finally, the subcommittee for noting. Is there anything you would want to discuss about it? Sorry, that's to be noted. Agreed. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe journey home.